Okay. Just below centre.
G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I've got this rifle in front of us. It's one in the 30 cals that we're setting up for ELR for now coming up into next season where we will stretch them out. I'm probably coming into the end of what I see as the basic overview of the 30 cals. I've got sort of ideas. I'll go through an overview at the end of things. But it is the 300 WSM, so 300 Winchester short magnum. Over to the side here, we've got the little ray of really what we've tested now. There's the little fella, the little stubby one, the 308 at the beginning there. There's other ones, there's 3006 and that sort of stuff as well. But I've just got sort of size based to what we're actually shooting at the moment. So there's the 308, the 300 WSM. Then we've got the 300 PRC, then the 300 Win Mag, then the 300 Rum, and the 30 378 Weatherby Magnum. That's a little range, but today what we're talking about is the 300 WSM, which I had some ideas of where I think it's going to sit. It's sort of proven some of them right for the testing we've done, but it's also a little bit more than I expected it to be from what I've seen. So let's get into, I'll overview that at the end of this video, but let's get into what we've got here. This rifle you've sort of seen before. This is the Bighorn Action, short action, which I have in here, which we did the first build we did was the 6.5 4S gap SAWM, so it's basically a 6.5 SAWM. Which we set up here in a 27-inch barrel, I think it was. We also did a 6mm in this same rifle. So same sort of thing, 20-inch barrel and a 6mm SAWM. Shot really well, really nice action, like it. It's went through all the features there. It's got an exchangeable bolt head, it's control feed, nice control. I have in this one the Timney 2-stage trigger. It's in the MDT LSS XL Gen 2 chassis as what's in here. It's got one of their grips on it. It's got one of my bag riders on it, and it's got one of my fore ends on it with a bag. So it's got this barrel guard that mounts the spigot to run my bipod system. Is the basics of the rifle. One of my floating Night Force attackers sitting on top with an air attack base. This one actually has just a 30 MOA rail, and I've used that base to get this up to where I'm 0 to 100 yards with this scope. This one gives me 128 minutes of elevation from there. And on the front is one of my 4-port muzzle brakes. The bit that's made it, the 300 WSM, is a Swan barrel, 27-inch barrel, 1 in 10 twist, in a heavy profile barrel. So still comes up to like just over 25mm at the end, but just a fairly normal sort of barrel. And I was really setting this up to shoot extreme precision, to shoot long range, and do some ELR testing, but really considering more that the WSM, being a short fat one, which is this it standing by itself here, being a fairly short fat case, it wasn't going to be ideal for pushing super heavy bullets. So I was never intending to run the 250 grain projectile in it, but I was expecting to be really good, probably at around the 200 grains. And really, I suppose where the cartridge comes from where I know it spoken of very highly is in hunting circles. It's very good in a lot of that place, but it's also in the F-class target shooting, 1,000-yard competition, that sort of stuff. I know it's done very well in those places. So the 200 grain, I think, is sort of married to go with this, and whether it's down at as little as 150 in a 30 cal or 170 or 185, whatever it is, I'm sure it's used in lots of different places with different twists and that side of things. And I think there's a lot of them in a 22 and a 24-inch sporter barrel sort of stuff that do that sort of work. They're similar to the 3006, obviously, with a bit more thump to it. So I wanted to go sort of halfway between, still sort of go a little bit more down the notch into the big 30-inch barrels or things like that, but try and make it work well. So I went with the 27-inch, and the 1 in 10 twist was because I really wasn't intending to be going into the 230s and above. I really felt the 200s, but when I sat down and was just about to do the build for it, I thought, listen, the 220 I think might work very well. Now the 220 grain burger is what I'm talking about. It's a hybrid target, and really what it is it's taking the to 30 grain projectile, and using some of those features and tuning it up to give you the 220 grain projectile with the same ballistic coefficient as the 230 grain burger. So that's what I used, and what I did with this one actually, I had intention to go and do exactly the shoot that I'm about to show you, which was at 613 yards, I think it is, and the 613 to 620 depends where we lay down the hill. And then out at 1300 yards to do its first test and see how it all shoots, and do a little bit of what I do in the way of load development, just see how it shoots and pick in between. And what I did to start off with was the same as I normally do also, was set up 4 cartridges with different powder loads of roughly where I thought it would be to just get pressure settings. Now with this one, because of all the trying to sort of guess in between and make sense of things, I went with 2 powder choices to start off with. I went with 2217, which is your Hodgins 1000, and I went with 2225, which is the Retumbo. I normally have selected one. I really couldn't make up my mind between the two because I was up to, so I set up 4 of each. I found, and roughly we're talking coming up to and on the 70 grains of powder, and went with the same loads for each. 2 grains intervals between each one. So that's what I did, and went out and shot them. I found that the 2217, I should say an extra detail. Normally I just do pressure, but I actually did this shot when I did those 8 rounds when I was doing the 28 Muzzler. Just did it off camera, no scope on it, just fired them just to check my pressure, but I did it across the chronograph. In both cases, those intervals went up by about 100 feet per second on every time I took that next one. It was 100 feet per second higher. So in both cases, I ended up in the 2950 feet per second out of a 220 grain bullet in this 300 WSM. So I was very surprised at the amount of speed I got. But I would say what I did see in the 2217 is I saw stamping in the 2 top loads. I saw a little bit of stamping, a little bit of a tight bolt lift. No, I can't remember exactly that, but there was a little tiny bit of stamping. So I thought, okay, that's too much. When I looked at the 2225, the only place I saw a tiny bit of stamping was on the top one. Now these are only one shot. I don't normally measure speeds when I do that side of things, but I thought, okay, 2225 or Retumbo is what I'm going to go with. And wow, 2950 is more than I expected to see. So to do this shoot, I went out with 2 different powder loads, and I took one step. Because I only saw the tiniest bit of stamping and everything felt good, I actually went to the 2 grains. So I went from 8 grains from my minimum load, or what I actually came out with was 2 loads, one at the 3rd highest setting and one 2 grains above from that. So I'm not going to get into specifics of the powder load because I don't want to be doing the wrong thing by people that are not experienced enough to do this, and I don't want to put them in the wrong place. But that's what I went out with. I went out with a test load, which I'd figured things out. I checked things to where I had 2 loads. One that was going to be inside the pressure where everything was good, and one that was going to be right on the edge of it. And I'll explain more about that brass stamping and what I was up to there at the end of it. But those are the 2 loads I went to a shoot with. So let's just do those. Let's just do a little, see what we get.
Radio.
See what speed we get, and see what sort of grouping it does.
Good to go. Just below centre.
It's a nice little whack.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
28.62.
Cool. On top of it.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
28.55.
Just above.
28.64. That's pretty hard to complain about, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Maybe
Awesome.
I just want to try these other ones.
Okay.
That's 3 shots. We could keep going more, but they're brand new, so.
Yep.
Let's just see. These other ones
Yep.
are running more powder, and I think those are all perfect. No stamping, no nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing. So these are a little bit more powder. Let's just see how quickly they go.
Rightio.
I reckon they're going to go, I'm going 2 minutes down.
Rightio.
They might go low, we'll just see.
Yep.
Straight on.
Yep. Bottom left.
Okay, well they're 29.67.
Okay, a bit quicker.
So I went down a little bit low, so that was
Yeah.
that bottom quarter. I'll just stay there, see what I get out of these. Just do 3 of these as well.
Rightio.
29.67.
Oh,
29.38, so a bit bigger spread.
yep, okay. Just,
40, so a little bit of spread, but still.
just the top right of that group. So.
Yeah, so still a freaking, what, 4-inch group.
Yeah, exactly. Very good.
Okay, well I think they're both good. There's a little bit more spread. Breadth first shots and that sort of stuff, but
Yep.
okay. Well, let's go to our longer target.
Rightio. I'll zoom back and then out there.
Okay, cool.
Bottom right.
Yep,
When-
alright. Okay, so cross 2. That's a 3. And up 2. Okay. Okay, well let's got one of these normal ones, the slower ones out there.
Okay.
Let's see where we go. That should be 36 in the dial. See where we go.
Yep. Hit. Beautiful. 2 o'clock. Yep. Right edge.
Beautiful.
On there. Yay.
Right on speed.
That big heavy target just moves a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Big heavy target.
Hit. Beautiful center. Nice.
Nice. Big ring in it.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Center bottom. 6 o'clock.
Okay. Wasn't any lower.
Yeah.
Oh, is it down? Yeah, it is. A bit lower on speed, but still not terrible.
Okay. Center, just to the left of center.
It's not bad out there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll do the 5-shot group.
Rightio.
What are we at? What are we going to plate now?
4. Got 4 on the plate. Hit. But right on the bottom. So 6 o'clock,
Where the other one was.
just below it, just on the edge.
Okay. A little bit of movement there. Still. All on plate, shooting nicely.
Yeah.
we'll do the same with the fast ones, eh?
Okay.
Maybe just a 3-shot group with the fast ones.
Rightio.
Okay, well this is with the fast one, so it should be back a few. We'll see where it goes. About there, I think, and back to there.
Bottom right, feet on plate.
How low?
It's 3 inches from bottom, 3 inches from right edge.
Well, I'll just do another one exactly the same.
Okay, yep.
Won't adjust anything.
Yep. Three o'clock, 3 inches right edge.
Okay, no, still right. It's 10 feet per second faster.
Okay,
One more. They're a little tiny bit tight in the lift. They're a little bit too much pressure.
right here. Oh, just below 4 o'clock, 2 inches right edge.
Yeah, that's not a bad little group out of them.
Yeah, that's it.
They're just starting to stamp, and they're a little tiny bit tight to lift. So there you can see, in at 600 yards, both of those powder loads worked really well. I can instantly feel I'm running a little bit too much powder in the faster load there. There's a little bit of a tightness on the bolt lift. The stamping isn't terrible. The primer deformation is about spot on, but I'm getting a little bit tight in the bolt lift. So I think I can come back a little bit, and I think, well, in the first lot, the first on 600 yards, I saw a little bit more speed difference in the hotter round. In the second 3 shots I did with that at the 1300 yards, there was a little less, so it seemed to stabilise a little bit. And I saw a little bit the reverse in the softer round, in the slower round. Very consistent as started off with at the 600 yards, but there was definitely a speed drop. There was definitely a change out at 1300 yards. So listen, I suppose with this cartridge where I'm at is I've already figured out I'm going to come back down by just under a grain of powder, and I'm going to go out and set the next lot of loads up like that. Well, I'll actually pull some bullets probably and set them back up like that. There's a little bit more I want to do in the way of brass prep. I've done all the normal stuff I do, and I uniform the firing pockets. I do all my sizing and bearing and bits and pieces, deburring and VLD chamfering and that sort of stuff. And generally I tend to find there's a little bit of the virgin brass isn't quite as nice as the second or third firing of brass where everything settles. But I really want to see how that goes. There's probably a tiny bit I can do in dotting the I's and crossing the T's on my brass prep, but I think that load is very specific in this, and that's probably to do with the short fat and the big volume in the barrel and all that sort of stuff. But listen, I've got to say, I can't complain, especially on the faster stuff at 1300 yards to see a 6-inch group at there. Listen, performing really well. Rifle shoots really nicely, and I suppose at the moment my summation of the 300 WSM is I really like it. It's stood up a bit heavier than I thought it would. I wasn't expecting to get into the 2900s in any form with a 220 grain bullet. I was ready to come back down to the 200 grain bullet, but it performed. I don't think I'm going to try and go further in the 230s or 250s or 245s. I don't think I'm going to try and go up there. In the mass of things, it doesn't make sense. I think it's going to come back on it very heavily. And I suppose, to be truthful, in something like this 220 grain Berger hybrid target, it's performing so well. I expect really, I hope I should say, and I should be honest and say I expect that it's going to perform really well at ELR. Now, more testing to go down that road, but that definitely said to me that the short fat of the if you do those 3 bullets that we're talking about, let's see if I can get these up without knocking them all over. So when you look at that, then we really have got the short fat. It's running less powder, certain in the way of powder for speed. Out of what I've seen at the moment, the WSM is exceptional, and the short fat is right on that little sweet spot. And I think the 220 grain bullet is right in that little sweet spot as well. I think as you come back down, then you'll start to see more of the same spread, where the 300 Win Mag, from what I've seen, is going to push the heavy bullets, the 230s, 245s, 250s, the best out of all those three. And I think if you come right down into the really light bullets, if you went down to the 175s, 155s, or in that neck of the woods, then I think the 300 Winchester Short Magnum, the WSM, would probably win down there. And then less recoil, really good speed, all that sort of stuff. Ultimately, both of these seem to be about at their sweet spot with that's the PRC and the Win Mag at the 230 grain bullet, but the Win Mag can go up and do a little more with the big one. And I think the WSM seems to be really in the sweet spot with very little testing, so I'd have to qualify it with the 220 grain bullet. And I suppose there's one bit that, in being completely honest in my own head, I haven't tested the PRC and the Win Mag with even a slower powder. I've stayed at the Rotumbo, and maybe if I backed off to a slower powder, then that would change that equation a little bit. But this is like, in all tests, if I do all of them, I'm going to go broke. And where does it stop? For the testing I'm doing inside the range of what I do with the field I do, that's where it seems. The upshot of it is all great, all really good choices. I really, really like them. I was surprised how well the WSM performed with that heavier bullet, with the 220 grain bullet. It is a really good option. It's going to be interesting to see how those other two do with that 220 grain bullet as well. Like I said, same ballistic coefficient as the 230, a little less weight, so a little more speed. Puts it in a really, really good place, and still a good weight bullet. So I think that's enough confusion on my bullet weights and that sort of stuff. I really liked it. The rifle, listen, the Bighorn Action, they're very nice. They work really well. The chassis, all the setup works really nicely. And this is set up ready to go. We won't be stretching out into the really long stuff until we get dry paddocks again. So it's a few months off on that. But I'm really looking forward to it. As said, I'll probably just I'm doing a little guess on the powder side of things there as to where I think I'm going to see both things. And I should touch base. I've got some pictures which I'll show you on stamping. I've mentioned a couple of times. I know all the people that know all about their firearms and their cartridges and reloading know what I'm talking about. But for those who don't, this is an image that shows stamping. So if you see these ones here, you see that little line there. That is, if you look on this bolt face, you can see that little space in there, which is to do with how the ejector works. There's actually ejector comes here and flicks and pushes the brass out as you pull a bolt out. But that little space there is what we can see on the back of the cartridge. Now, what people talk about, there's two things to understand with stamping. One is it's basically talking about when there's enough pressure to make the brass become fluid, move like plasticine. Means that it'll show up where it's pressed against. And that generally is a sign you've gone to too much pressure. There's old school, we'll talk about over 60,000 psi and that sort of stuff. But I suppose I look at it a little bit different. If you've got a tiny bit of stamping, you've got a tiny bit of where you can see the mark, you can see the colour on the back of the brass from your ejector. Normally a Remington 700, you've got a ring, a circle on it I should say, or listen, whatever shape is showing up on the back of your brass. It is there for a couple of reasons. I would say if you've got big marks there, then okay, you're going way too far. I tend to use that as a guide and nothing more. So if I've got a bit of stamping, but everything else is working properly and nothing is changing the reloading of the brass, so I don't have any issues with the primer pockets opening up, I'm not flattening out my primer too far, I've not got a tight bolt left, but I've got a little bit of a mark there, I'm not going to fuss too much about it. But it is one of the clues. Because the reason I stepped back into it when I saw it was, like I said, it was one of the clues, but also this is virgin brass. So meaning never fired before brass. And that can be the fact that that case head is a little tiny softer, especially around where the printing and things gone in it. So you might see more of a mark there at exactly the same powder load that you won't see after it's fired 2 or 3 times. Still, it's a clue, and I suppose that's what I'd end up saying. it's a clue. It's one of the clues. So a tight bolt lift, okay, you've got something going. Maybe you can do something in sizing, but probably your pressures are a little too high. You've got squaring of your bolt of your primer. Yeah, listen, that's a pretty severe clue. Once again, I'll go to that image and show what we're talking about there. You can see that you can see the rolled edge, and from those cases to these cases, that's got slightly less rolled edge, and that's got slightly more rolled edge. So one's getting to a sharper corner. Both of those are acceptable looks to me, but like I said, goes with the clue. The little bit of stamping, but what really clinched it for me was the tight bolt lift. Once that bolt lift started to tighten up, I've gone past the elasticity of the case, it's pushed right out and then pushed further and then not springing back as much. So ultimately it wasn't terrible, and if it wasn't expanding primer pockets so I could reuse the brass, and I'm trying to get the absolute most out of what I'm doing, then okay, you might push those boundaries. For me, I'm going to come back inside that. I think that this is going to work best in everything, and that's including speeds, which we did see some differences in there by finding the sweet spot in between those two. But ultimately, really good speed. I should say, I expect that we're probably going to be around the 2,900 feet per second out of a 220 grain bullet in this thing, which still puts it a bit above where I expected to be. And yeah, an awesome cartridge. Listen, looking forward to finishing off with getting this one out and getting on 3,000 or further, and then do an overview of the whole lot of what I've learned through that ride. Anyway, guys, that's about enough of me banging on that one. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah, all went really well. Swan barrel performed really well like they always do. Everything else is trucking along just like it should do. Yeah, thanks for checking in on us. We'll catch you next time.